A very warm welcome to everyone joining us today for the special webinar hosted by PsychSpace Understanding Exam Stress, Psychological Roots, and Real Life Triggers. Exams have become a major source of pressure for students, parents, and even young professionals preparing for competitive assessments. In today's fast paced, performance driven world, exam stress can feel overwhelming and isolating. This session is designed to help us unpack why exam stress occurs, where it originates, and how psychological factors influence our thoughts, feelings, and performance during high pressure situations. Today we have with us Ms. Deepshika Kalita, a psychologist at PsychSpace who works extensively with students and young adults. Her work focuses on emotional well being, performance pressure, anxiety management, and helping individuals develop healthier coping strategies. She's also an expressive arts practitioner using creative approaches to facilitate healing and self discovery. We also have with us Ms. Gopika Dalmia, a certified counselor and relationship counselor. She has completed her master's in clinical psychology and works closely with adolescents and young adults, helping them understand their emotional patterns and build resilience. We thank both of them for joining us and sharing their expertise today. I'm Sridhari Devra and I'll be moderating this session. I'm currently pursuing my bachelor's in psychology and I'm delighted to guide today's conversation on exam stress, a topic so relevant and important for students everywhere. Let's begin our discussion by exploring the deeper psychological factors that shape exam stress and the real life triggers that contribute to it. This question is directed to Ms. Gopika. Students often experience physical symptoms during exams, for instance, racing heartbeat, sweating, and even blanking out in the exam hall. Could you explain how the body's stress response affects memory and concentration, and why students sometimes forget everything even after preparing well?
Okay, so thank you, Sridevi, for asking me this question. So let me start with something reassuring. If you have ever blanked out in an exam, you are not alone and there is nothing wrong with you. Many students experience this very confusing moments during exams. They have studied well, they know the material, but as soon as the paper is in front of them, their heart starts racing, their palms sweat, and their mind feels completely blank. This can feel frightening, but it's important to understand that this isn't a failure of preparation. It's a natural biological response. Although it feels alarming, but it is a very human response. These physical symptoms are often misunderstood as signs that something is going wrong. In reality, these are signs that the body's stress response has been activated. When we experience pressure, the brain activates the fight or the flight response. This response is controlled by the amygdala, a part of the brain that reacts very quickly to anything it perceives as threatening. The brain doesn't differentiate between the physical danger and the psychological pressure. So, in an exam hall, with the time limits and the expectations, can trigger the same response. So, once the system is activated, the body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones prepare the body for action, which is why the students notice physical symptoms like a racing heartbeat or shallow breathing, but they also reduce the brain's ability to perform tasks that require calm concentration, complex thinking, and the memory retrieval. So instead of helping performance, the stress response can start working against the students. To assess information, the brain relies heavily on the prefrontal cortex, which supports function and decision making, and the hippocampus, which plays a very important role in the memory. So, high level of cortisol temporarily reduce the functioning of both of these important areas. So the student doesn't truly forget what they studied, but the information is still there, but the brain is temporarily unable to assess it efficiently. So I often explain this using a simple metaphor that It's like having all your notes saved on your phone, but the screen freezes. So nothing is lost, access is just temporarily blocked. So as the exam progresses, breathing becomes steadier, the sense of threat reduces, and the cortisol levels begin to drop. This restores communication between the emotional brain and the thinking brain. And that's why many students say, after some time, everything suddenly came back to me. This is why students don't only need the academic preparation, but they also need nervous system preparation. And I want to share this not just as a theory, but from personal experience. These are the things I have genuinely used myself in the high pressure situations. For example, slow and controlled breathing before opening the paper. So this is something that I consciously did. Even like 3 to 4 slow breaths make a noticeable difference. Relaxing the shoulders and the jaw. I have noticed that when I intentionally drop my shoulder and unclench my jaw, my body immediately settles and my thinking becomes clearer. Grounding through physical awareness. Sometimes you just have to notice your feet on the floor or the hands on the desk. It sounds very simple, but it brings the nervous system out of the panic mode. Or a calm internal statement. Statements that reminds myself that I'm prepared. My brain just needs a moment to settle. So this gently shifts the mind from a panic to the reassurance. So these are small things, but they work because they tell the brain that this is safe. A calm body creates a clear mind, and once the stress response is regulated, memory becomes more accessible. I hope that this made sense.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for your response because you really helped us destigmatize the fact that when students assume that because they're blanking out, they're just incapable. It's not that. It's not the brain failing, but it's actually in the survival mode. Uh, so now moving on to the next question. We often talk about parental or societal pressure, but many students say the strongest pressure comes from within. Miss Deepshika, how do you think behaviors like perfectionism, self criticism, or the need for control intensify exam stress, sometimes even more than the external expectations? And what are some strategies that you think you can follow?
Yes, Sridhari, I'd like to go ahead with this answer. So, most of the time when we talk about exam stress, we mostly focus on the external factors such as pressure from our parents, pressure from the society, competition in the classroom, and stuff like that. But sometimes the strongest pressure that a child or a student can feel is from their internal behaviors. And like you said, some behaviors like perfectionism, maybe self criticism, and a strong need for control. So let us tackle one by one. Okay, first of all, when we talk about perfectionism, most of the time, perfectionism is not about just doing well or wanting to perform well. It is about being flawless. They feel like that they must do everything flawlessly. There should not be even one hint of anything wrong. And their standards for themselves are so rigid and very unrealistic that even though they are prepared, almost every time it feels like it's not enough. It's not enough for them. So that's how, perfectionism can be such a big pressure on a student. So whenever they commit like even a small mistake, it can feel like that it's very a big mistake for them. It feels very catastrophic to them, and it can lead to constant anxiety, and they might even, for the next exam, what they will do, because they have committed a mistake in this exam, they might study to a very, high extent. They might overstudy. They might even sometimes what happens, the opposite happens. Instead of overstudying, they might procrastinate. Instead of studying at all, they might do the very opposite, and they might start procrastinating. And emotional exhaustion is also something that we see long before even the exam has arrived, because for their standards for themselves are so high. So they tend to either go at a very high limit, or sometimes they feel like that they have failed, so they'll, as a whole, they'll leave the entire thing. That's what perfectionism or perfectionistic student can go through. Again, self criticism, that also adds another layer of stress. Criticizing their own work can be good, but it can also, criticizing our own work is often good because we can learn from our mistakes, right? But sometimes we have this tendency to nitpick every single thing that we do. And many students carry this inner voice, which is far harsher than anything that anyone would actually say to them. They have thoughts like, I should have done better. Others are managing this. Why can't I do it? Or if I don't do well, it means that I'm not good enough. I'm not capable enough like the other students. So, all of these things consume their mental space, and this happens when they are already under the exam stress, right? So during exams, this internal dialogue or this internal, thing that they have going on, it interferes with their focus. It interferes with their memory, right? After exams, they might have this sense of relief, but even then, this cycle of, self criticism goes on. Once they get their exam results, they'll be like, I could have done better, I did not do well. Even when, like, one mark is missing, they can be like, why did I lose that mark? So they start ruminating in their head, and this cycle of stress just keeps, going on and on and on again. All right, then you also, I think, said something about need for control. Yeah. So usually people who have a need for control, once they feel like, the things in their external environment are not in their control, they feel very anxious, or they feel like, they are not in the control at the moment, so they don't feel secure. So exams are something which are unpredictable by nature, so they cannot fully control the questions, they cannot control their outcome or the time limits given. So for students who tend to rely on control, this feels like, something which is not secure for them, and that can be very unsettling for them. So to compensate from that, what they can do, they might overplan things again, have a rigid structure, have a rigid routine, and they might also become very highly distressed when things don't go as exactly as they planned. Okay. Okay. What makes internal pressure powerful is that it is constant. External expectations may vary, but internal rules such as, I must not fail, I must stay in control, I must be perfect are always present. Over time, these things, their demands also, the demands for themselves rise, like, one after another. For example, they set a standard for themselves, like this time I must score 90. Once they achieve that, they are not satisfied, that they'll go after the next thing. They'll be like, I must score next time, I must get 100. So that's how their standards keep on rising. And this kind of pressure, it is very constant. External factors may go, it may come and go, but internal factors always tend to be very much constant and much much harsher than the external ones. So how can we help, or like, what strategies can they perform to, get some sort of help from this situation? First is, we can help them learn, or we can teach them to move from a perfection focused mindset to a progress focused mindset. For example, helping them to learn that, the effort that they put, the consistency that they put, the learning that they, go through are much more important than the outcome that they will arrive at. Because, they put a lot of effort and they are also consistent, but no one is, praising them, or like, appreciating them for those things. So maybe if we teach them to, value those efforts and consistency and other things that they already have, then maybe it will reduce a certain level of fear and emotional strain on them. Secondly, students can be taught to notice their own inner dialogue. The things that I said before, like, why am I not being able to perform like other students? Why they are doing better than me? Maybe I'm not capable enough. Those things, maybe we can teach them to notice those dialogues, and we should help them form other types of questions, such as, during an exam, or like during an exam preparation, if that thought is coming to them, we can maybe ask them to replace it with thoughts like, is this thought helpful to me right now? Or would I speak like this to my sibling? Would I speak like this to my dearest friend, or to my, some other person who is important to me? Would I say these things to them the way that I'm speaking to myself right now? So, stuff like that. Then, focusing on what is controllable, focusing on things that is controllable, such as preparation, time management, then resting, self-care, rather than fixating on outcomes, might also reduce certain levels of, or certain amount of, their anxiety. When this entire thing about exam stress, and the way students tend to be perfectionist and self-critical, we cannot completely, say, get rid of the entire thing, but also these are certain strategies that we can at least use or help them learn. And I hope this answers your question, Sridhari.
Yes, I think you're right when you said that the inner critic often it sounds more rational, but it can be far more damaging than the external pressure. And the strategies that you mentioned are not just useful academically, but across many areas of adult life as well. Now, many students I have seen don't struggle with studying. They struggle with the emotions that studying bring up, like fear, shame, or inadequacy. Coming to you, Ms. Gopika, what role does emotional regulation play in academic performance, and how can students learn to manage difficult emotions without feeling overwhelmed by it?
Okay, so now building on this idea of safety and regulation, let's talk about the emotional regulation, because academic performance, it's not just about what you know, but it is also about how you manage what you feel. So this question highlights something very important. For many students, the real struggle is in the syllabus itself, but the emotion that come up while studying. So, emotional regulation refers to the ability to notice the emotions, to understand the emotions, and to respond to them in ways that support your goals, especially during the stressful situations like exams. So, even students who are prepared, who are highly capable, and are hardworking students can struggle academically when emotions such as anxiety, frustration, guilt, or fear become overwhelming. So, these emotions directly affect the attention, focus, planning, organization, the memory, motivation, and the decision making part. So, emotional regulation isn't an extra skill, it's a core part of academic performance. So, when emotions are not regulated, the brain stays in a high alert state. In this state, thinking becomes reactive rather than reflective. So, small setbacks feels overwhelming, self criticism becomes louder, and students may procrastinate or avoid studying altogether. So, this is not because they are lazy or indisciplined, it's because the emotional brain is overpowering the thinking brain. So, I often explain emotions as signals rather than the problems. So, they are like indicators on the dashboard. They show that something needs attention, but they don't mean the entire system is broken. So, when students learn to respond to emotions instead of fighting or avoiding them, performance becomes more stable. So, here are a few practical and evidence based strategies that I often talk about again. And these are the things that I personally practice and also encourage students to try. So, the first thing is just labeling the emotion. So, this is something that is very simple, and we should use it more actively. It is it is as simple as simply saying, okay, I am feeling anxious right now. So, this reduces the intensity almost immediately. So, this technique is called affect labeling, and it helps calm the emotional brain. Second is regulating the body to regulating the mind. So, I rely a lot on slow exhalations, especially when emotions feel overwhelming. So, once the body settles, the mind genuinely follows. Thirdly, breaking work into emotional cycles. So I've learned that pushing continuously often increases emotional resistance. So working for about 45 to 50 minutes and then taking a short breaks help prevent that emotional buildup. Finally, changing the way we speak to ourselves. So, this has been one of the most important shifts for me personally as well. So, harsh self talks increases stress, while supportive language creates a sense of internal safety, and that directly improves consistency and focus. So, emotional regulation doesn't mean suppressing fear, shame, or self doubt. It means learning how to work with your emotions rather than against them. So when students learn to do that, they don't just feel better, they study more effectively, perform more consistently, and recover faster from academic stress. So I hope this answers your question.
Yes, thank you so much for that. I think this gives students the permission to engage with their emotions rather than fight them. And it also highlights how important it is to learn how to tolerate discomfort as much as it is important to learn exam content or syllabus. This last question is for you, Ms. Deepshika. Exam stress doesn't exist in isolation. It accumulates over long years of schooling and can slowly erode motivation. What helps students build long term academic resilience so that exam pressure doesn't compound into burnout across semesters or years?
Yes. So when we talk about exam stress, like you said, it does not exist in isolation or it does not appear all of a sudden. So for most students, it accumulates gradually over years of schooling, years of studying, repeated cycles of pressure, repeated cycles of performance, and repeated evaluation and results, and that can slowly drain out the motivation that they had, the self confidence that they had, and also affect the emotional energy. If if this exam stress is not addressed, it can eventually obviously lead to burnout. So, how can we help in that, or how can we avoid that? Right? In long term, academic resilience is not about being just stress free. It's also having the capacity to adapt to that, to recover from that, and also continue functioning despite growing ongoing demands. Because let's be real, as a student rises, or as a student goes from one standard to a different standard, the pressure is going to rise, the difficulty of their subject is going to rise, the difficulty of their field is going to rise. So it's not going to decrease at any certain point, looking at the real world scenario. So what we can do is that we can help them be have some build some capacity to recover, adapt, and continue going, which is in essence your resilience. So one key factor in building resilience is developing a sustainable relationship with achievement. When Not when, like in general, students tend to tie their entire identity to their grades and the results, and whatever way that they're performing, that becomes their entire identity, right? So as a student, I can also, as a previous student, I can also relate to that. I'm sure you all also can relate to it. So after every exam, whatever kind of grades that we get, whatever kind of results that we get, we feel like at that moment, if we get something good, we are at a good place, right? And that's how every exam result or every exam becomes or makes them emotionally vulnerable. So over time, this leads to a chronic pattern of stress. And so what can we do? And we can should we encourage students to say academics as an entire identity, or as just one part of their identity. I think the second is much better. So encouraging students to see academics just one part of their identity, and not as the entire thing, rather a small part of their whole. And this can also create a lot of space for space for their other emotional experiences. All right. Then another important element is consistency over intensity. So many students tend to rely on last minute effort and prolonged periods of high stress, which may work short term, but it is not sustainable at all. Regular study habits, such as, having realistic workloads and planned breaks, or like, having a planned routine, that might definitely, help them prevent emotional and physical exhaustion. Also, I think already Gopika said very nicely about emotional regulation. So, it plays a very important role in long term resilience. Students who learn to recognize their own emotions, recognize their own difficulties, maybe if they're facing, maybe, some students tend to feel a very high amount of stress right before the exam period. If they can identify that thing, if they can identify maybe whether they're feeling anxious, whether they're feeling frustrated, disappointed, or whatever, or is it a combination of everything, if they're able to identify, identification is the very first step. If they're able to identify, maybe then they'll be able to learn to recover or adapt to it, right? This includes again accepting difficult emotions rather than suppressing them, and also equipping them with strategies to calm their nervous system when which always is one of the main things, w- which is one of the main things which, runs this entire stress, or like this entire stress thing. Okay, next is your support systems. Those are equally important, and resilient students are not those who learn to cope alone, right? Having a healthy support system, or having an important support system around you, those students, who have a better peer, are surrounded by better peer support, better teacher support, family members, they do better than students who have, parents or peers who are not present around them or are neglectful, right? So it is very important that they feel understood, and also they feel supported throughout this entire thing, which is very, which is something, as students, yeah, the biggest thing that can happen to you is your exams and your results. So if they have someone around them to support them during that period of time, or to at least talk to them, that is something which could mean a lot to them, right? Then finally, resilience is not about, helping students to redefine themselves, but also it is also about, helping them see their own setbacks and take those setbacks as not criticisms but feedbacks, rather than, seeing those as like something shortcomings. They can see those as feedbacks which will help them to improve, and that can also help them to motivate and help them to build their self confidence from there on. That mindset will allow them to learn, adjust, and continue moving forward without accumulating excessive emotional stress from them. Okay, to sum up, we can say that long term academic resilience comes from balanced effort, emotional awareness, supportive relationships, and a flexible definition of success where we are not binding it to any kind of rigidity. When these are in place, exam pressure is less likely to compound into burnout and more likely to remain a manageable part of a learning journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deepshika. I think you brought this point out very beautifully that resilience is actually a skill that can be cultivated and not just a personality trait which is innate to people. And it's less about toughness and more about sustainable engagement. So thank you so much, Ms. Deepshika and Ms. Gopika, for sharing such meaningful insights with us today. Your perspectives have helped us understand exam stress in a deeper, more compassionate way, reminding us that stress is not a weakness, but a human response that can be understood and managed with the right tools. On behalf of the entire Space team, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to our speakers for taking the time to guide us through such an important topic. And of course, a big thank you to everyone who joined us today. Your presence made this session truly special. For more informative sessions and mental health resources, make sure to follow PsychSpace on all our social media platforms. And remember, if you ever feel overwhelmed or need support, we're always just a message away. Thank you once again, all of you, for being here. This is Sridhari Devra signing off from today's webinar.
Thank you, Sridhari.